Somebody help me, please!
Shut up, old man. Nobody's coming. Hey! Get off him!
Fatherless, $11 in his pocket, stood between four thugs and an old biker he'd never met. No weapon, no backup, just shaking hands and a decision he couldn't take back. The old man's Harley lay sideways on the curb, his leather jacket torn at the shoulder. He looked up at Flynn like he couldn't believe what he was seeing.
No, sir.
4-on-1. A kid who skipped meals to pay rent, squaring up for a stranger who couldn't stand up. Flynn had no idea who he was protecting, but the patch sewn inside that torn jacket read 2 words. And every MC from Texas to Detroit knew what those words meant. You touch him, you don't wake up. But we need to go back. Before the alley, before the fists, before Flynn Turner made the dumbest, or bravest, decision of his life. East Side. 12 blocks of cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, and the kind of quiet that doesn't mean peace. It means people learn to stop calling for help. Flynn grew up here. 3rd floor of a walk-up on Glendale Street, where the elevator hadn't worked since before he was born. The hallway smelled like mildew and fried onions. The lock on the front door had been broken twice this year. Nobody fixed it. The radiator clanged at 2 a.m. like someone trapped inside was trying to get out. His mother, Diane Turner, worked 2 shifts at Greenview Nursing Home. Morning shift, night shift, sometimes both back-to-back. She'd come home with her scrubs smelling like disinfectant and her lower back so stiff she had to grip the kitchen counter just to stand straight. She never complained. Not once. She'd reheat whatever was in the fridge, ask Flynn about his day, and fall asleep on the couch before he could finish answering. Flynn's father left when he was 4. No note, no phone call, no birthday card, no child support. Just a gap at the kitchen table that Diane filled with extra hours and Flynn filled with silence. He didn't even have a photo, just a name, Gerald Turner, that his mother hadn't said out loud in 17 years. By 21, Flynn had 3 jobs. He loaded pallets at a warehouse from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. He ran deliveries for a Chinese restaurant on Vine Street from noon to 5, pedaling a bike with a chain that slipped every 3rd block. Weekends, he fixed pipes and toilets for neighbors who paid him in cash, sometimes $20, sometimes a plate of food. He took both without hesitation. Every dollar he didn't spend on rent went into a shoebox under his bed. Not for himself. Diane needed surgery on her lower back, L4 to L5 disc herniation. The doctor had explained it like Flynn was supposed to understand. What Flynn understood was the number. $4,200 for the copay. He was at $1,900. 11 months of saving, getting closer, getting there. The Southside Kings ran East Side like a toll booth. You walked their block, you paid attention. You bumped their corner, you paid cash. They tried to recruit Flynn 4 times. First time he was 16, last time 3 months ago. Darnell Price, their shot caller, had put an arm around Flynn's shoulder like they were old friends. You're smart, Turner. Strong. You could eat with us. Flynn shrugged the arm off. I'm good. You sure? 'Cause your mama working herself dead and you out here fixing toilets for soup money. I said I'm good. Darnell smiled the kind of smile that files your name away, the kind that says, we'll talk again. Flynn wasn't brave. He'd say that himself. He wasn't tough. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was a kid trying to keep the lights on and his mother's spine from collapsing. But there was one thing Diane had drilled into him since he was old enough to listen. You see someone in trouble, you help. Even if it costs you. Especially if it costs you. Flynn carried that sentence like a scar. Most days it didn't matter. Most days he kept his head down, did his work, walked his routes, went home. Most days nobody was getting beaten in an alley at midnight. Tonight wasn't most days. Friday night, 11:43 p.m. Flynn clocked out of the warehouse with dust in his lungs and a paycheck that wouldn't clear until Wednesday. His shoulders ached. His left knee, the one he'd twisted unloading a pallet 2 weeks back, throbbed with every step. He didn't have bus fare. He walked. East Side at midnight had a rhythm, dogs barking at nothing, bass thumping from a parked Cutlass 3 blocks over, the occasional siren, far enough away to ignore, close enough to remind you where you live. Flynn took his usual route. Down Macon, left on Chambers, cut through the lot behind the laundromat. 14 minutes door to door if he moved fast. Earbuds in, head down, eyes forward. That was the East Side commute. He was passing the alley between Chambers and Polk when he heard it. A grunt. Low, thick. The sound a man makes when he's trying not to scream. Then a voice. Young. Amused. Check his pockets, get the chain too. Flynn stopped. His body stopped before his brain made the decision. Feet planted, head turned, earbuds pulled out, eyes adjusting to the dark between buildings. 4 of them, all wearing black. 2 he recognized, Southside Kings. The tall one in front was Darnell Price, same gold chain, same crooked smile, same voice that had offered Flynn a spot at the table 3 months ago. They were standing over an old white man, 60-something, big frame but crumpled on the concrete, white beard, leather jacket, plain black leather worn soft from years of use. His hands were up, palms out, trying to shield his face. His breathing came out in short, sharp bursts, the rhythm of a man counting how many more hits he could take. Next to him, a Harley-Davidson Road King lay on its side. Chrome scratched against the pavement. Saddlebag torn open, contents scattered. A bandana, a flip phone, and a small leather-bound notebook with no label. Darnell kicked the man in the stomach. The old man folded. His forehead hit the concrete. He didn't cry out, didn't beg. That silence seemed to make Darnell angry. I said, empty your pockets, Grandpa. Don't make me ask nice again. The old man reached into his jacket with a shaking hand, pulled out a wallet, thin, worn brown leather. He held it up without looking. One of the others snatched it, flipped it open, laughed. $43? That's it? You riding a $20,000 bike with $43 in your pocket? Bike's worth more than him, Darnell said. Take the keys. The old man's jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes, not fear. Something harder, something colder, something he was choosing not to use. But his body was too beaten to back it up. 2 against 4 was still 2 against 4, even if one of the 2 used to be dangerous. He stayed down. Flynn stood behind the dumpster at the alley's mouth, close enough to hear the old man's breathing, ragged, wet, the kind that means ribs are bruised or worse. His legs said run, his chest said stay. His brain ran the math. 4 of them, all bigger, all meaner. 1 of him, tired, sore, 160 pounds with no weapon and no plan. He thought about his mother. If he got hurt, if he got killed, she'd have nobody. No son, no shoebox money. No one to carry the groceries up 3 flights because her back couldn't do it anymore. She'd find out from a cop at the door. She'd bury him in the same church where she'd married his father, and she'd do it alone. Walk away, Flynn. Then the old man coughed, a deep rattling sound that bounced off the alley walls, and Darnell pulled his foot back for another kick. And Flynn remembered being 8 years old, sitting on the curb outside Jefferson Elementary with a split lip and a torn backpack, watching 30 kids walk past him like he was part of the sidewalk. He'd sat there for an hour. Not one person stopped, not one adult, not one kid. He remembered how that felt, the invisibility of it, the slow, heavy understanding that nobody was coming, that he didn't matter enough for someone to break stride. Flynn's hand found the lid of the dumpster. Cold metal under warm fingers. Steady. He wasn't brave. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a hero. But he was not going to be the 31st person who walked past. Flynn grabbed the dumpster lid and slammed it against the metal body. The sound cracked through the alley like a gunshot. All 4 heads snapped toward him. Hey! His voice came out louder than he expected, louder than he felt. His legs were shaking, but his mouth was already running. Get off him! Now! Darnell squinted into the dark. Then he laughed, that slow, loose laugh of someone who can't believe his luck. "Turner, that you?" Darnell stepped forward, arms wide. "Toilet boy out here playing hero?" The other three fanned out. One cracked his knuckles. Another pulled something from his belt. Flynn couldn't see what. Didn't want to. "Walk away, Turner. This ain't your business." Flynn didn't walk away. He stepped into the alley, into the light, into the worst decision of his life. "4 guys on one old man. That your business, Darnell?" Darnell's smile disappeared. "Last chance, toilet boy." Flynn planted his feet. "No!" The first punch came from the side. Flynn didn't see it, just felt the explosion across his left cheek. His vision went white. Then his knees hit concrete. He'd never been hit that hard in his life. "Get up!" He got up. The second one came from Darnell himself, a straight right to the stomach. Flynn folded, air gone, mouth open, nothing coming in or out. The alley tilted sideways. "Get up!" He grabbed Darnell's jacket and pulled himself upright, threw a punch, sloppy, wild. But it connected, knuckles against jaw. Darnell's head snapped back. For 1 second, surprise replaced the smile. Then they swarmed him. 4-on-1 is not a fight. It's a beating with an audience of 0. Flynn covered his head, took a boot to the ribs, an elbow to the back of the neck. He went down again, tasted concrete, tasted copper. The world reduced to sounds, grunting, fabric tearing, his own heartbeat louder than all of it. But every time he went down, he got back up. Not because he was strong, because he'd spent 21 years watching his mother get knocked down by life and stand back up every single morning. That was the only fighting style he knew. He stumbled between Darnell and the old man, arms out, blocking, blood running from his split lip into his mouth, one eye starting to swell shut. "Move, Turner." "No. I will put you in the ground." "Then do it. But you're going through me first." Something in Flynn's voice, the flatness, the certainty, the absolute absence of bluff, made Darnell hesitate. Just for a second. Just long enough, because behind Flynn, the old man was getting up, slowly, painfully. One hand on the wall, one hand balled into a fist. His white beard was dirty, his jacket was torn, but his eyes had changed. The fear was gone. What replaced it was something ancient, something trained, something that hadn't been used in years but never left the muscle. The old man stepped beside Flynn, shoulder to shoulder. "Kid," he said quietly, "get behind me." "No, sir, I'm good right here." The old man looked at Flynn, really looked at him, and something in his expression shifted. Not just gratitude, recognition, like he was seeing someone he'd been looking for. Darnell saw the old man standing, saw the way he held his fists, not like a victim, like a man who'd ended fights before they started for 3 decades. "Yo," one of the others muttered, "let's bounce, cops." Sirens, distant but closing, blue light flickering off the buildings at the far end of Chambers. Darnell pointed at Flynn. "This ain't over, Turner, not even close." They ran, sneakers slapping wet pavement, gone into the dark like they'd never been there. The alley went quiet, just 2 men breathing hard, one young, one old, both bleeding, both still standing. Flynn leaned against the wall, his ribs screamed. His eye was swelling shut, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The old man sat down next to him, pulled a bandana from his jacket and handed it to Flynn without a word. They sat there, 2 strangers in a dirty alley at midnight, catching their breath, saying nothing. Flynn didn't know it yet, but he'd just saved the most dangerous man in the state, and that man was already deciding what he was going to do about it. The sirens faded. Whoever called it in, the cops didn't come. They never did on East Side, not fast enough. Not for this. Flynn pressed the bandana against his lip. The bleeding had slowed, but his face felt like it belonged to someone else. Numb in some places, on fire in others. The old man sat beside him. He hadn't said much. He was holding his ribs with one arm, breathing in careful, measured doses, The way someone breathes when they know exactly how much pain each inhale will cost. "You all right?" Flynn asked. The old man let out a short laugh, winced immediately. "Kid, I should be asking you that. I'll live." "Yeah, you will." The old man turned his head, looked at Flynn with pale blue eyes that seemed too sharp for someone who'd just been on the ground. "What's your name?" Flynn Turner." "Earl Graves." He extended a hand, rough palm, grip stronger than it should have been for a man his age. "Retired mechanic, work on bikes mostly." Flynn glanced at the Harley still lying on its side. "That yours?" 32 years. Earl looked at the bike like it was a person. "She's had worse nights than this. So have I." Flynn stood up first. His ribs protested, but he reached down and helped Earl to his feet. Together, they lifted the Road King upright. Flynn was surprised by the weight, 600 pounds at least. Earl steadied it like he'd done it 1,000 times. Earl checked the engine, turned the key. The Harley rumbled to life, low, heavy, a sound that seemed too loud for the quiet alley. He nodded, satisfied. "You need a hospital?" Flynn asked. "No hospitals." Earl said it the way people say things that aren't up for discussion. "I've had worse." He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a crumpled receipt and a pen stub, wrote a number on the back, handed it to Flynn. "You ever need anything? Anything at all? You call that number." Flynn took it, folded it into his pocket. He figured he'd never use it. People said things like that, they never meant it. "Why'd you do it?" Earl asked. "Do what?" "Step in. 4 of them. One of you. You don't know me." Flynn shrugged. The motion sent pain down his left side. "Nobody else was gonna." Earl stared at him for a long moment. The kind of look that weighs a man, measures him, files him away. Not the way Darnell did, with threat, but with something else. Something Flynn couldn't name. "Get home safe, Flynn Turner." "You too, Mr. Graves." Earl threw a leg over the Harley. The engine growled. He pulled out of the alley slow, headlight cutting through the dark. Flynn watched until the red taillight disappeared around the corner of Macon Avenue. Then he walked home. 14 minutes, head down, ribs burning, one eye swollen shut. He told his mother he fell off his bike. She didn't believe him. She made him ice. She didn't push. That was Diane Turner. She always knew when to hold and when to let go. 3 days later, Flynn was outside Dragon Palace on Vine Street, loading sweet and sour chicken into his delivery bag, when a Harley pulled up to the curb. Earl Graves, same white beard, bruise on his cheekbone fading from purple to yellow. Wearing a plain flannel shirt, work boots, and a look on his face like he'd been planning this visit since the alley. "Hey, kid." Flynn stared. "Mr. Graves?" "Earl. Just Earl." He swung off the bike and walked to Flynn's delivery bicycle, crouched down, spun the front wheel. It wobbled badly, squeezed the brake lever. Nothing happened. Checked the chain. Rust on every link. "Your chain's stretched. Rear brake cable's shot. Front tire's bald. You're one pothole from a hospital visit." He stood up. "How long you been riding this thing?" "It works. It works the way a 3-legged dog walks, technically." Earl opened a leather tool roll he'd strapped to his Harley's saddlebag. "Give me 20 minutes." Flynn leaned against the restaurant wall and watched Earl work. Hands that moved with a precision that didn't match retired mechanic. He adjusted the chain tension, replaced the brake cable with one he'd brought. Like he'd already inspected the bike and gone shopping, and trued the front wheel with a spoke wrench. "You came here to fix my bike?" Flynn asked. Earl didn't look up. "I came here because somebody should have helped you a long time ago. Consider this a down payment." That sentence hit Flynn somewhere below the ribs. The same thing his mother said, turned inside out. You help because someone should have helped. "I don't need charity, Mr. Earl." "Good, because I don't give it." Earl wiped his hands on a rag. "I need help at my shop. Saturdays. Pay and work. 15 an hour, cash. You know engines?" "I fix toilets." "Close enough." The shop was on Reading Avenue, a small garage. 2 bays, concrete floor stained with decades of oil. A hand-painted sign outside read, Graves Custom Cycles. Below it, smaller, by appointment only. Flynn showed up that Saturday at 8 in the morning. Earl was already there. Coffee on the workbench. 2 mugs. He'd been expecting him. They started with a 1998 Sportster that needed a carburetor rebuild. Earl didn't teach the way teachers teach, with patience and rehearsed encouragement. He taught the way fathers teach, by doing, by pointing, by letting Flynn mess up and then showing him where and why without making him feel small. Torque wrench, 35 foot-pounds. Don't guess. Feel it. Flynn felt it. Off by 2. Earl nodded. Again. By noon, Flynn could disassemble and reassemble a carburetor in under 40 minutes. His hands smelled like gasoline and solvent. His back hurt from leaning over the bench. He hadn't felt that good in months, maybe years. They ate lunch on overturned milk crates behind the shop. Sandwiches Earl had made that morning. Turkey and Swiss on wheat. Nothing fancy, everything deliberate. You live alone? Flynn asked. Yep. Family? Earl chewed, swallowed, looked at a point somewhere past the chain-link fence, past the rooftops, past whatever memory lived behind that question. Had a daughter, Clara. A long pause. The sandwich stopped halfway to his mouth. Car accident. 10 years ago next month. Flynn didn't say sorry. He'd heard sorry enough times about his own father to know the word was empty when someone handed it to you like a participation trophy. He just nodded and sat with it. She would have liked you, Earl said quietly. Then he changed the subject to valve clearances and didn't mention her again. Every Saturday became a standing appointment. Then Tuesday evenings. Then the occasional Thursday when the warehouse shift got canceled. Flynn started learning things he didn't know he wanted to learn. Fuel injection, electrical wiring, the difference between a shovelhead and a panhead, and why it mattered to people who cared about things that lasted. But more than engines, he was learning how to be around a man who didn't leave, who showed up when he said he would, who poured a second cup of coffee before Flynn walked through the door because he already knew he was coming. He didn't call Earl Dad. He didn't call him anything but old man. And Earl called him nothing but kid. But the gap at Flynn's kitchen table, the one his father left 17 years ago, was starting to feel less like a hole and more like a door. One that someone had finally walked through. Earl met Diane on a Tuesday. Flynn hadn't planned it. He'd mentioned the leaking sink in passing. Earl showed up the next evening with a pipe wrench and a bag of fittings. No phone call, no warning, just a knock at 6:15. Diane opened the door with her arms crossed and her chin raised. You must be Earl. Yes, ma'am. Flynn says you fix bikes. Among other things. You any good with sinks? Better than your landlord, I'd guess. Diane almost smiled. Almost. She stepped aside and let him in. Earl fixed the sink in 20 minutes, replaced the faucet washer, tightened the supply line, cleaned the aerator without being asked. No small talk, no performance. Just a man doing something useful in someone else's home. Diane watched from the kitchen doorway, arms still crossed. But by the time Earl was packing up his tools, her shoulders had dropped an inch. That was Diane's version of trust, measured in inches, not words. Stay for dinner? She asked. It wasn't warm. It was a test. Earl looked at Flynn. Flynn shrugged. Yes, ma'am, thank you. They ate at the kitchen table. Rice and beans, baked chicken with hot sauce that Diane made herself from habaneros she grew on the fire escape. The table had 3 chairs, but only 2 had ever been used at the same time. Earl sat in the third one. Nobody mentioned it. Everybody noticed. After dinner, Earl washed the dishes. Diane tried to stop him. He ignored her. Flynn sat on the couch watching them, his mother drying, this man she'd met 40 minutes ago washing, and felt something shift in the room. Something warm and unfamiliar. Something he was afraid to name because naming it meant it could be taken away. The next week, Earl came back, replaced the weather stripping on the front door, fixed the radiator that clanged at 2 a.m., a corroded valve stem. Brought a bag of groceries he claimed he'd bought too much of by accident. Diane knew it was a lie. She accepted it anyway. He pretended it was casual, she pretended she believed him, and the refrigerator stayed full for the first time in months. One evening, while Earl was in the bathroom, Diane pulled Flynn into the hallway. "Who is this man, Flynn?" "He's a friend, Mom. Men don't do this, not for free, not without wanting something. Last man who was nice to us left and never came back. I can't do that again, and I will not watch you go through it either." Flynn didn't have an answer. He just said, "He's different." They all are, at first. But Earl kept coming back, week after week, never late, never empty-handed, never asking for anything except maybe a cup of coffee and a place to sit where someone was glad to see him walk in. One Thursday night, Flynn and Earl were in the garage, late, both greasy up to the elbows, rebuilding a transmission. The radio played low, The Temptations, Diane's kind of music that Flynn would never admit he liked. Flynn didn't plan what came out of his mouth. It just felt like a thing too heavy to carry alone anymore. "My dad's name was Gerald. He left when I was 4. I don't have a picture of him. I don't even know what he looks like anymore. Sometimes I try to remember and there's just nothing." Earl's hands stopped moving. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes were steady. No pity, no performance. "That's his loss, kid, not yours. A real man doesn't leave. Remember that." They went back to work. Neither spoke for a while. The Temptations filled the silence the way music is supposed to, just enough to keep the quiet from getting heavy. A week later, Earl brought a package wrapped in brown paper, set it on the workbench without ceremony. "What's this?" "Open it." Flynn unwrapped it. A leather jacket. Not new, broken in, soft, the kind of leather that only gets that way after years on the road. Black, simple, no patches, no logos. "It's just a jacket," Earl said. It wasn't just a jacket, they both knew that. Flynn put it on. It fit like it had been waiting for him. Like someone had worn it in, shaped it, and set it aside for the right person. "Old man," Flynn said. "Kid," Earl said. That was enough. It took 5 weeks for Darnell Price to find him. Flynn was locking his delivery bike outside Dragon Palace when he saw the paint. Red spray across the seat and handlebars. Still wet. The letters dripping down the frame like something wounded. "Dead man walking." He stood there holding his bike lock. The air smelled like aerosol. He looked up and down Vine Street. Empty. Nobody saw. Nobody had to. The message wasn't meant for witnesses. It was meant for Flynn. He cleaned the paint off with turpentine borrowed from Mr. Huang in the restaurant. Took an hour. His hands were raw by the time he finished. He didn't tell anyone. Not Earl. Not Diane. He told himself it was a warning. Just talk. Eastside was full of talk. 2 days later, the talk became something else. The manager at Dragon Palace, a short, nervous man named Mr. Huang, met Flynn at the door before his shift started. "Flynn, I'm sorry, I can't." He looked at the floor. "There were men here yesterday, after you left. They said if I keep you on, they'll break the front window. Every week." "Mr. Huang, I have a family, I'm sorry." Flynn lost the delivery job in under 30 seconds. $12 an hour and tips. Gone. Just like that. He walked his clean, paint-free bike home and did the math. Without the delivery gig, the shoebox under his bed would stop growing. His mother's surgery would slide from maybe by winter to maybe never. He picked up an extra shift at the warehouse, worked until his vision blurred at 4 a.m. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But he showed up anyway because that was the only thing Flynn Turner knew how to do. Then they came to the apartment. Diane was home alone, a Thursday afternoon. She heard the knock and opened the door expecting Mrs. Patterson from 2B about the building meeting. 3 young men stood in the hallway. She didn't recognize them, but she recognized the look, the flat performance calm of people who want you to understand that they're choosing to be polite and can stop at any time. "Tell your son he's got 48 hours. 48 hours for what? He'll know. They left. No raised voices, no threats on paper. Just 3 strangers who knew her name, knew her address, and knew her son. When Flynn came home that night, Diane was sitting at the kitchen table with every light in the apartment turned on. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Flynn, sit down," she told him. Every word. The knock, the faces, the message. "Call the police," she said. Flynn called. The East Side precinct took down the information, gave him a case number, said they'd send someone to check the building. Nobody came. Not that night, not the next morning, not the morning after that. This was East Side. The police didn't protect you here. They filed you. Flynn sat on his bed that night and stared at the ceiling. His mother was afraid to open her own door. His jobs were disappearing. His savings were frozen. Darnell Price had decided to make an example of him, and there was no institution, no school, no government, no badge that was going to step in. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a number he hadn't called since the night in the alley, the one on the crumpled receipt. His thumb hovered. He thought about what Diane said, "Men don't do things for free." He thought about what Earl said, "You ever need anything." He thought about the gap between those 2 truths and whether he had the right to close it. He pressed call. Earl picked up on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. "Kid, what's wrong?" Flynn told him. All of it. The paint, the job, the men at his mother's door, the police who didn't come. Earl was quiet for a long time. Not the silence of someone thinking, the silence of someone deciding. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, harder. The warmth was still there, buried, but something else had surfaced, something that sounded like authority, like a man who was used to giving orders and having them followed without question. 3 words. "I'm coming over." Earl said he'd be there in 30 minutes. He was there in 20, but he wasn't alone. Flynn heard the first engine at 10:47 p.m., a deep, rolling thunder that rattled the windows of the 3rd-floor apartment. Diane looked up from the kitchen table. Flynn walked to the window. A single headlight turned onto Glendale Street. Then another. Then 5 more. Then a sound that Flynn had never heard in 21 years of living on East Side. The synchronized roar of dozens of V-twin engines moving in formation. They came around the corner like a convoy, 2 by 2, headlights cutting the dark in parallel lines, chrome gleaming under the few streetlights that worked. The road vibrated. Car alarms on the block triggered one by one, a chain reaction of noise that pulled every face on Glendale Street to a window. Flynn counted as they passed his building. 10, 20, 30. They kept coming. 40, 50, still coming. Harley Davidsons, Road Kings, Street Glides, Fat Boys, Electra Glides, all black, all chrome, all ridden by men and women in black leather jackets with a patch on the back that Flynn couldn't read from 3 floors up. They parked. Both sides of Glendale, kickstands down in sequence. The engines died one by one until the street was quiet again. But a different kind of quiet. The kind that comes after something large enters a room. "Flynn!" Diane's voice was tight. "What is this?" "I don't know." But he did. Somewhere in his chest, beneath the confusion, he knew. He went downstairs. Diane followed. When he opened the front door, the street looked like it belonged to a different city. 53 motorcycles lined the curb. Over 60 riders stood beside them, men and women, most of them built like people who'd lived hard lives and survived all of them. Arms folded, faces calm, not aggressive, just present. And in the center of the street, standing next to his Road King, was Earl Graves. But not the Earl that Flynn knew. This Earl wore a leather vest over a black t-shirt. The vest was heavy with patches, front and back. The back patch was large, white letters on black, Iron Reapers, MC. And below the club name, in a curved rocker, President Flynn's legs stopped working. He stood on the front steps and stared. Earl walked toward him. Same face, same beard, same blue eyes. But the posture was different. The way he moved was different. Every step carried weight, Not physical weight, but the kind that comes from decades of being the man that other men answer to. "Earl?" Flynn's voice cracked. "What?" "Should have told you sooner, kid." Earl stopped at the base of the steps. His voice was quiet, just for Flynn. "I wanted you to know me first, not this." Flynn looked past Earl at the rows of riders. Patches on every vest. Sergeant at Arms, Vice President, Road Captain, Treasurer. Chapter names from cities he'd never been to. Memphis, Houston, Jacksonville, Detroit, Birmingham. Some of them were looking at Flynn. Some of them were smiling. All of them were still. "These people," Flynn started. "My family." Earl turned to face the street. He raised his voice, not a shout, but a projection. The voice of a man who'd addressed rooms and roads and courtrooms for 30 years. "Brothers and sisters, this is Flynn Turner." Silence. 60 pairs of eyes on a 21-year-old kid in a torn hoodie standing on the steps of a walk-up on East Side. 5 weeks ago, this young man saw me getting beaten in an alley by 4 men. He didn't know me. He had every reason to walk away. He had no reason to stay. Earl paused. He stayed. He took the beating meant for me. He stood between me and 4 men, and he did not move. A murmur ran through the riders. Low, respectful, the sound of people recognizing something. His family is being threatened now because of what he did for me. Earl's jaw tightened. That ends tonight. He turned back to Flynn, put a hand on his shoulder. Your family is our family now, kid. From this moment, nobody touches you. Nobody touches your mother. Nobody comes to this door again unless they're bringing groceries. Diane was standing behind Flynn. She'd heard everything. Her hand covered her mouth. Her eyes were wet. But she wasn't crying from fear. She was crying because for the first time in 17 years, someone had shown up for her son and brought 60 people with him. Flynn looked at Earl, the mechanic, the sandwich maker, the man who fixed radiators and poured second cups of coffee, the man whose daughter died and who never said her name without stopping mid-sentence, the president of the most feared motorcycle club on the East Coast. Same man. You could have told me, Flynn said. Would you have let me fix your bike? Flynn thought about it. Probably not. Earl nodded. That's why. Mrs. Patterson from 2B leaned out her window and stared at the army of motorcycles below. She looked at Diane. Girl, who are your friends? Diane wiped her eyes, straightened her back, looked at Earl Graves, President Iron Reaper's MC, standing at the bottom of her steps like he belonged there. Family, she said. They're family. The Iron Reapers didn't come to East Side with weapons. They didn't come with threats. They didn't need to. They came with presents. At 6 a.m. the next morning, 53 Harley-Davidsons rolled through the blocks that the Southside Kings had claimed for a decade. Not fast, not loud, just riding. 2 by 2, vests visible, patches readable. They didn't stop. They didn't speak to anyone. The message was in the motion, in the weight of 60 riders passing through your territory like it was a public park on a Sunday morning, like you didn't exist. Darnell Price was standing outside the corner store on Whitfield when the first row of bikes turned the corner. He had 4 guys with him. The laughter stopped mid-sentence. 53 motorcycles rolled past in a line that took 3 minutes to pass. Every rider looked straight ahead. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. A stare means you matter enough to threaten. Silence means you don't matter at all. This wasn't confrontation, it was erasure. Darnell watched. His boys watched. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke until the last taillight disappeared around the corner of Whitfield and Elm. Yo, one of them muttered. Were those Iron Reapers? Darnell didn't answer. They came back Sunday. Same route, same pace, same silence. This time, people on East Side came out to watch, standing on porches, sitting on stoops with coffee, kids pointing at the chrome, old men nodding like they recognized something they hadn't seen in years, something that looked like order. Monday morning, the Iron Reapers vice president, a man named Stone Wallace, 6'4", 260, with a scar across his left eyebrow, walked into the corner store on Whitfield. Alone. Bought a bottle of water. Drank it on the sidewalk. Took his time. Darnell came out. "You got a problem?" Darnell's voice was hard, but his posture told a different story. Weight on his back foot. Ready to move backward, not forward. Stone looked at him, finished the water, crushed the plastic bottle in one hand without breaking eye contact. "The kid on Glendale, Flynn Turner, and his mother Diane." "What about them?" "They're under our protection." Stone didn't raise his voice, didn't lean in, didn't do anything that could be mistaken for aggression. "We clear?" Darnell looked left and right. His boys were watching from inside the store, through the glass, not standing beside him. "You coming all the way down here for some kid?" "I'm coming down here because our president asked me to, and when he asks, I come. Same as every brother and sister in that line yesterday, and the day before that." Stone paused. "You know who we are. You know what we can do, and you know we're choosing not to. That's the part I need you to understand." Darnell understood. The Iron Reapers had 12 chapters across 7 states, 230 active members, a reputation built over 3 decades, not on crime but on a simple principle. You don't touch what's ours, and we won't have to remind you why. "We clear?" Stone asked one more time. "Yeah." Darnell's voice had lost its edge. "We're clear." Stone nodded once, walked to his bike, rode away without looking back. Within a week, the Southside Kings pulled out of 3 blocks on East Side. Not because anyone told them to leave, because every time they showed up, an Iron Reaper was already there, parked on a bench, drinking coffee, reading a newspaper, existing calmly in a space that used to belong to fear. You don't fight an organization that has more patience than you and nothing left to prove. You leave. And they left. Flynn got a call from Earl on Wednesday evening. "Come to the clubhouse, kid. There's something I want to show you." The clubhouse was on Route 19, 20 minutes outside the city. A low, flat building with a gravel lot and a row of bikes parked out front, so clean they looked like a museum exhibit. Flynn had expected darkness, smoke, something from a movie about outlaws. Instead, he found a wall of framed photographs, charity rides, toy drives for children's hospitals, Thanksgiving dinners served at shelters, a scholarship board with 23 names, kids from rough neighborhoods who'd gotten through trade school or community college with Iron Reaper funding, a trophy case from motorcycle rallies dating back to 1994, a kitchen where a woman named Trudy was making pulled pork for 30 people and yelling at someone named Hank to stop eating the cornbread. "This is the club?" Flynn asked. "This is the club." Earl leaned against the bar. "We're not a gang, kid, never were. We're a brotherhood. We protect what matters. We build what lasts. And when someone proves they belong, we don't let them go." Flynn looked at the scholarship board. 23 names. 23 people who'd been where he was and made it somewhere else. "There's about to be 24, Earl said. 3 things happened in the next 60 days. First, Earl set up the Turner Fund. Not a massive foundation, not a press conference, just a bank account seeded with contributions from every Iron Reaper chapter in the country. The money went to trade school tuition for young men and women from neighborhoods like East Side. No application essay, no GPA requirement, just a conversation with Earl and a handshake. Flynn was the first recipient. Full tuition at East Side Community College, automotive technology program, 2 years. Books included. He cried in the garage when Earl told him, turned away so Earl wouldn't see. Earl saw. Didn't say a word, just handed him a shop rag and pointed at a carburetor that needed finishing. Second, Diane got her surgery. L4 to L5 disc repair. The Iron Reapers passed a hat at the next chapter meeting. $3,700 in one night. Earl covered the rest. Diane tried to refuse. Earl said, "Ma'am, you raised a man who took a beating for a stranger. The least we can do is fix your back." She didn't argue after that. The surgery was scheduled for October. Stone Wallace drove her to the hospital. Trudy brought food every day for a week. Hank ate half of it, but nobody complained. Diane walked without pain for the first time in 6 years on a Tuesday in November. Flynn was in class when she called him. She was laughing and crying at the same time. He sat in the hallway of the community college with his phone pressed to his ear and didn't say anything for 2 full minutes. He didn't need to. Third, Flynn became a prospect of the Iron Reapers MC. Not a full member, not yet. That takes a year. You ride, you learn, you prove that you're not just someone who showed up, you're someone who stays. Earl gave him the prospect vest on a Saturday morning in the garage. Same workbench, same 2 coffee mugs. This doesn't make you special, Earl said. This makes you responsible. Flynn put on the vest. It was lighter than he expected. He thought it would feel heavy, the weight of belonging to something. Instead, it felt like the leather jacket Earl had given him weeks ago, like it had been waiting. The last time Flynn sat in that garage, it was late, November, cold enough to see his breath. Earl was across the workbench, hands wrapped around a mug, white beard lit by the single overhead bulb. They weren't working on anything. They were just sitting. The way a father and son sit when everything that needed saying has already been said. Old man. Kid. Flynn smiled. Earl smiled back. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's a stranger in an alley who shouldn't have gotten back up, and a kid who shouldn't have stepped in. But they did. And that made all the difference. Now I gotta ask you something. And be honest. If you were Flynn, standing behind that dumpster, $11 in your pocket, 4 guys in front of you, would you step in? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that doing the right thing still matters. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next one.
4-on-1, no weapon, no backup. And Flynn Turner didn't move. You know what's right? Earl Grave commanded 60 riders across 7 states. He could have anyone at his side, but the person who earned his loyalty wasn't a soldier or a prospect. It was a fatherless kid facing toilets for soup money who refused to look away. That's the thing about real power. It doesn't come from the patch on your back or the number of people who fear your name. It comes from what you do when there's nothing in it for you. Flynn didn't save Earl because he was strong. He saved him because his mother spent 21 years teaching him that your character is what you do when nobody's watching and nobody's coming to help. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. If courage is standing up and when it costs you everything, what do we call it when we stay silent because it costs us nothing? And when's the last time you were close enough to help someone and walked away telling yourself if it wasn't your business? Drop your answer below. I read everyone. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next one.